Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Joining me in the council chambers are City Clerk, Ms. Defoe, Deputy Clerk, Mr. Bantock, CAO, Ms. Thompson, and Director of Corporate Services, Ms. Kruger. And if you could join me in a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. And I'll turn the meeting over to Ms. Defoe. The meeting is yours.
Through you, Your Worship. Item 2 is declarations of pecuniary interest. Are there any declarations? And would you please state the general nature thereof?
Seeing none.
Item 3 is adoption of the minutes, and there is a motion that the minutes of the regular meeting dated January 9th, 2023, and the special meeting dated January 16th be adopted as printed.
Moved by. Thank you, Councillor Beatty. Second by Councillor Wardolfa. All in favor? Opposed of any, and that's carried. We're just going to take a little pause here. I think we're trying to adjust a sound situation here. So just give me a moment, and then I'll turn it back to the clerk.
Through you, Your Worship. Item 4 is adoption of the addendum. I'm just going to pause. Through Your Worship, item 4 is adoption of the addendum, and there is no addendum to be adopted.
Thank you.
Moving to item 5, report of the Committee of the Whole in camera session. Item 5.1, at the January 23rd, 2023 Committee of the Whole in camera session, that meeting was canceled. Moving to item 6, hearings of deputations and presentations. As noted on the agenda, delegations have been listed under the relevant report in section 7 of this agenda. So moving to item 7, orders of the day. Item 7.1 is a resolution regarding the Stratford Attainable Market Housing Project update. The CEO of Invest Stratford and the consultant Caroline Baker of Baker Planning Group will provide a presentation, and I would turn it over to Joni Gerber, the CEO.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity, everyone. This is an interim report on the Attainable Housing Project that our team, as well as the many departments in the City of Stratford, have been working on. Certainly, your report goes into much of the background and the funding models with which we've received some supportive funding to get us this far. Many of you have been interviewed as well by the consultants, and so we've got a good, wholesome collection of information, and we're here tonight to provide you with an update as to where we stand. So understanding that we've got a limited amount of time, I'll turn it over to the project management consulting Caroline Baker from the Baker Planning Group.
Good evening. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Caroline Baker from Baker Planning Group. I am a professional land use planner, and I'm part of the project team that was retained by Invest Stratford and the City of Stratford to assist with the Attainable Housing Project. If acceptable, I do have a PowerPoint presentation that I could share. Let me know when you can see it on your screen. Just give me a moment here.
That's great. Thank you, Caroline.
You can let me know when it's up and everybody can see it properly.
Yep, that's perfect. That's good.
Because my technology usage is so great. So thank you for your understanding. So first, I just wanted to mention a little bit of background leading into this project, as well as the agenda for this evening's presentation. So first, just to note, this is an interim update. We are working our way through the project, and certainly we'll be back in front of council with a public meeting, more fulsome assessment and recommendations at a later date. Today, the intent is not for recommendations or decisions, but essentially an interim update of where we're at, but certainly to collect feedback that we can consider as part of future recommendations. So as mentioned, I did want to provide some background. This project is a continuum of a project that was completed almost 2 years ago. In 2020 and 2021, there was funding secured through the Rural Economic Development Program, or referred to as RED, for the Stratford Housing Project. That was adopted by Council in June 2021 and provided a roadmap to add additional attainable housing units in the city of Stratford. From that report, there was a number of recommendations, and Invest Stratford then secured in 2022 additional RED funding to implement some of the recommendations from that housing report. And what you'll see is where there was components including a community incentives toolkit, looking further at a pilot project and land owned by the city, as well as awareness campaign about the importance of the issue to all residents in the city. This project is managed by Invest Stratford, but of course in full consultation with city staff. There is a working group with a variety of city staff from across spectrums at the city, from planning to building, social services, housing, to ensure that we have that feedback and input as we move forward. Certainly with respect to this specific project, the focus is attainable housing. Certainly there is a continuum or a spectrum of housing that most communities will have, all with various different needs. And this project specifically being funded through the Rural Economic Development Program was looking at the lens of supporting our local businesses, our industries. Through Invest Stratford, they've clearly heard that one of the most significant barriers to attracting new employees is the lack of attainable housing. And is with this approach that this project was started. Certainly on the housing continuum, there is a variety of issues and types of housing, moving from homelessness to supportive housing to affordable housing, and then to attainable housing and full market regular housing. And I just wanted to take a quick moment in terms of the difference between affordable housing and attainable housing. Certainly in years gone by, we've had clearer definitions on how we use those two terms. But as you'll see when I move through this presentation, Bill 23, which I know you're all familiar with from late last fall, is looking to or has modified those definitions. So traditionally, affordable housing had a very clear definition. It was 30% of income in the low to moderate income level. And then we move into Bill 23, and they're looking at now 80% of average market rate. So that certainly is a shift. But at the beginning of this presentation, just to provide clarity that this specific project is looking at attainable housing, and certainly the needs of homelessness and supportive housing and affordable housing are very important. And the social services department at the city has that mandate under their purview. So keeping in mind the project deliverables relate to attainable housing, the three key deliverables. So the first is a community incentives toolkit, which we'll get into in a moment, largely financial incentives to encourage attainable housing. The second is a media campaign to drive interest, inspire action, and participation in this community need. And the third is to look at two pilot housing projects in the city of Stratford. This is just a quick visual demonstration of where we're at in the project and its 5 phases. We're in between 3 and 4. The first phase, late summer, early fall of last year, was background review, getting the project team and the working group started. Phase 2 was preparing draft policy directions, looking at the type of incentive programs that could be available along with service delivery. And then through the late fall and winter, there was the large portion of the public consultation program. And just to give you a bit of insights on what that included, it included a public survey that was available online and in print. It also included interviews with the previous council as well as the new council. It included a public open house that was held at the Rotary Complex. It included stakeholder sessions, and that included a variety of stakeholders that we would see in the provision of housing, from faith-based organizations, educational institutions. It included developers, it included not-for-profits. And maybe just to clarify at this moment, when we use the term builder, Really from our viewpoint in looking at this project and any incentives or recommendations, a builder is really any individual or organization or business that is adding additional homes or units to our community. So I know sometimes builder, developer get mixed together, but we certainly look at the broad spectrum of all of those in the community that contribute or provide housing. We're now just heading into phase 4, which is the development of the framework for the attainable housing, working on the pilot project, and then hopefully soon launching the media campaign. And the last step will certainly be back to council for a public meeting and a refinement finalization of the community incentive toolkit and recommendations for consideration by council. Just going to take a brief few minutes to explain each of those 3 key project deliverables a little bit further. So the community incentives toolkit will define a project area. So essentially that's a geographical area in which property owners could apply or utilize the toolkit. It'll include leadership programs to encourage more attainable housing units, consideration of financial incentives. So just to give an example of other communities, for example, if you have an attainable housing unit, you may qualify to not pay a building permit application fee or a minor variance fee. Pre-Bill 23, it often included reduction in development charges. That's certainly been a shift as we adapt this project moving forward. Very important, includes a marketing plan because it's only so good as the awareness in the community to utilize the plan. Implementation for staff, how they report to council, where monies or financials grants may be given, and then monitoring to ensure that it's working as it was intended. As I've mentioned a few times now, Bill 23 certainly added some additional components and discussion and looking at ways of how to redirect some of these programs. As I'm sure you were briefed in the fall, Bill 23 is a provincial bill, the More Homes, More Faster Act, and essentially does a number of things. But one of them, and key to this project, is that it mandates that development charges, which the city collects for every new housing unit, cannot be charged for rental or ownership of affordable units or the ownership of attainable units. Now, often the reduction of development charges is a critical component of the incentive toolkits. So we've met with the project team, with Invest Stratford and the City of Stratford to look where the opportunities of types of housing that Bill 23 did not address. And in fact, one of those is attainable housing units that are rented. It only deals with attainable housing units that are for sale. So looking at that opportunity of where there might be additional ways to assist. The other component that we'll be certainly looking at as a project team to bring back to you is to build in flexibility into the toolkit. As we all know, provincial rules can change. Sometimes they can change really quickly, and we want the ability for the city and Invest Stratford to either dovetail or redirect their toolkit and have various options depending on funding mechanisms and requirements at the province. Of course, the goal of the incentive toolkit is to balance creating opportunities for attainable housing, but reducing any potential financial impact on the general residential tax base. And that's certainly something that'll be considered and evaluated as part of the report that comes back to you. I'm going to jump over to the media campaign now. Certainly we have Nancy Orr and Associates and Creative Feats are part of the project team assisting with the media campaign. The slogan that's been developed is let's be neighbors. And really the goal of the media campaign is to inspire, educate, inform, drive action of all of our citizens on why this issue of attainable housing is important to all of our community. And that those that are affected by the lack of attainable housing are the people we know and the people we see every day. In that regard, the intent is it'll be a social media campaign through all the various media channels, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. I'm probably a bit too old to know all of them, but basically to work through a social media campaign. We have identified at this point about 10 local residents from a variety of backgrounds across different ages and professions and housing needs that have struggled to find attainable housing. And they have very kindly agreed to share their story, either in written or video, that would be included as part of the campaign. Again, the intent is to get the attention of all the citizens in Stratford and then drive them into wanting to participate in a solution. That it's not just one item or one thing that can happen that'll solve this issue. It's complex. And we want to drive them to a web page or a landing page that allows them to have different options on how they can help, whether it's adding a new basement unit, whether it's participating in planning applications, all those variety of options, again, to demonstrate it's a community need and we need all the community support to get there. The last component, as mentioned, is the pilot housing project. This stemmed from the previous work in 2020 and 2021. Certainly the city does own certain properties within the city that may be considered to be surplus to their needs. And it's looking at how to use this resource in order to support housing in the community. The goal is to look at different options. Is it an instance where the city develops housing? Is it an instance where they partner? Or is it an instance where they sell and use the financial gain from selling to support attainable housing? The pilot housing project will include development concepts. It'll include a summary of the approvals process, as well as a detailed pro forma to see how this land can be utilized to best support attainable housing and where potentially the proposed incentives can assist in that regard. I'm going to leave there for questions and answers. I can stop sharing screen. I apologize, that was a lot of me talking, but certainly we're here to answer any questions now or later on this evening, but I will just stop share here.
Thank you very much, Ms. Baker. Any questions from council at this time? Councillor Henderson, please go ahead, and Councillor Burbach.
I might have missed this, but is there any climate change considerations being taken in? Because as we all know, that if you make your house more environmentally friendly, the cost of everything goes down, your hydro, your water, everything.
Ms. Baker?
Certainly, through the Mayor to Councillor Henderson, thank you for that question. The City of Stratford and its staff have been, I believe they've hired a staff person to assist on matters related to climate change. My understanding is there is forecasting or looking into in the budget in years coming up to look at opportunities to encourage more sustainable homes and how that could similarly be supported through incentives. So that'll be, it's an excellent point. It'll be a separate study that I understand is certainly on the minds and budgeted amongst city staff.
Thank you. Councillor Burbach.
Thank you. Through the mayor. Just a couple of questions. One is about definitions for attainable and affordable housing. Did we not have some definitions in that original roadmap project that we put forward at that time?
Through the Mayor to Councillor Burbach, you are certainly correct. Council passed a resolution on the definition of attainable housing. It included components such as suitable to the needs of the person looking for the housing, available at the time that they're looking, and suitable to their income level of what they could afford. It's a very similar definition to what we see in Bill 23 for attainable housing. What we're working on as a project team is it's a very helpful definition. But when we start to look at financial incentives, we need to quantify that definition. So what I would say is that's a qualitative, it's a descriptor, but to ease in implementing the incentive program and how to prioritize who gets the incentives, our project team will be looking at how to quantify it. So numerically, how to quantify it.
Great, thanks for that. The other question I had was under the toolkit, you talk about a municipal leadership program. What does that mean?
So that can include a number of different programs. One that I have seen quite often, for example, is an awards system. So they recognize, either staff or, and again, I use the term builder as developer, not-for-profit, faith-based, anybody adding a unit who's done an exemplary job. And the idea is to bring additional spotlight and attention to the incentives toolkit to inspire greater uptake.
Great, thank you. Just one last question. You talked about the attainable rentals being outside of what Bill 23 or within what we can allowably put incentives on within the Bill 23. And I'm wondering about co-op housing and how that fits into what you know about Bill 23. And would that be a possible model that we could use for some of the pilot projects that we're looking at?
Certainly co-op housing is a model to be explored. When I mentioned that the housing project will look at, for example, partnerships or who they could sell the land to, that is certainly an option. The way Bill 23 is structured and the revisions to the Development Charge Act, which have been approved, they don't necessarily specify the builder's financial model. So whether it's a not-for-profit or a developer builder, but what it does say is that the unit has to be arm's length. So for example, if I give a unit to my child, that's not arm's length, but it's essentially a third-party buyer. It doesn't specify to that degree, but certainly something we will explore through the pilot project.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further from council? Seeing none, thank you very much for that wonderful update, and thank you to Invest Stratford for your work thus far on this project. I refer to it frequently as a made in Stratford solution to a problem that every community has, so thank you very, very much. And I'll turn it back to the clerk.
Through your worship, there are 2 delegations registered to speak to this item, and I would ask for a motion that the delegations of Nicole Andre and Jason Davis regarding the attainable housing project be heard.
Thank you very much. Moved by Councillor McCabe, second by Councillor Burbach. All in favor? Opposed to bidding, that's unanimous. Then I'll let the clerk or the deputy clerk to bring, I believe Nicole is coming in first, and I believe Nicole is joining us by phone. Is that correct?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. The floor is yours.
Sorry, say that again. I'm just having trouble hearing.
That's okay. We can hear you. We have your information that you shared earlier with the clerk's office, and you go right ahead. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. So I'll say hello. My name is Nicole. Sorry, I don't have internet today, but I appreciate being able to deliver this deputation by phone. And I also appreciate hearing the update from the Attainable Housing Project. I wanted to just take a moment to introduce myself and shed some light on why this project is so important to me. I am single, low-income renter, and over 70% of my income is spent on housing in a bad month. What that means is I don't have much in the way of savings. I'm not able to contribute to an RSP. And if any emergency comes up, if something breaks, like a small appliance, if I have a health issue, I fall into debt. So I consider myself precariously housed. Every time I walk into town, I pass the tent encampment behind the bus station, and I think, if not through the grace of God, there go I. If I were rent evicted right now, I'm not sure I'd be able to find another bachelor that I could afford, and I use that very loosely. And I have put off having kids indefinitely at this point, which is heartbreaking for me because I can't see how it would be in good conscience I could bring kids into such a precarious situation. As an aside, because I know that Jason Davis is going to bring up tiny homes and that sort of thing, I would like to say that I also have a chemical sensitivity that makes it debilitating for me to share air with other tenants. And I would downsize to a 500 or a 600 square foot detached tiny granny garden suite in the downtown area in a heartbeat if I could own it or if it would allow me to put aside money for my old age. All of this is to say that the housing crisis is real for me in a way that I imagine no one on council or leading this project or at the decision-making table for this project can relate to. Slide 3, please. We are the primary stakeholders, and by that I mean people who can't attain or own affordable homes. And I was surprised when I asked about attending the stakeholder brainstorming session to be told that it would be builders, lenders, and realtors that were invited to this. I can only imagine that everyone at those sessions owns at least one home. And while I appreciate that they are indeed stakeholders and they do hold interests and concerns in this project, what myself and others who have managed to engage with the project are flagging is that you've prioritized the stakeholders and consultations with the stakeholders backwards. Slide 4, please. So if we're the primary stakeholders, then we should be the first people to define needs, identify opportunities, propose solutions. Then we need to liaise with the secondary stakeholders to identify risks, limitations, threats. But we weren't invited to the table for that generating of ideas process. At the secondary stakeholder level, and you can see some listed there, I'm happy to hear that social housing is at the table in some form, I assume. They would be the ones to identify potential steps to mitigate those risks and limitations and threats, identify the necessary logistics, policy, costs for implementation, and then liaise with us and the service providers to define the processes for implementing those solutions. That is where I would imagine that the tertiary stakeholders, which would be those service providers, would come in, and they would be liaising primarily with the secondary stakeholders to implement these solutions. So it seems as though the priorities in this process feel very prescriptive and paternalistic. And the pushback that you're getting from primary stakeholders to this approach is because we've seen it before and we've never seen it work. Slide 5, please. So my colleague, who's a pastor in Manitoba, has a saying, if I'm not at the table, I'm on the menu. And right now we feel like we haven't been given a voice that has decision-making power at this table. It feels more like we're looking at a menu from online or standing outside a restaurant door reading, what's posted in the window. And then if we can find the Yelp page, we might be able to review. And so what I'm asking is for this project to extend its deadline to allow the primary stakeholders an opportunity to be at that chef's meeting to help brainstorm ideas, to invite experts who we think can help. And I see were a lot of great experts involved in some capacity, but there's people missing from that list. So at that point, you can take these ideas back through the process front to back as opposed to back to front. Slide 6, please. So despite the project not always being adequately publicized or monitored, and despite the Engage Stratford page not always being functional, a lot of concerns are being raised there. And for every one comment, that represents many more people that share that same view. So I also would encourage anyone who has more ideas on how to create affordable housing to post them there in the Q&A section of the project page, as I intend to do. I realize that the blind spots that are being flagged are not likely intentional. They're likely unintentional, but that doesn't mean that they're not damaging and dangerous. And so 2 concerns that I'd like to highlight is that even if the project's sole intention is providing homes for potential employees, as the representative, whose name I've forgotten, mentioned in her presentation, that includes PSWs, orderlies, clerks, ushers, ticket takers, servers, line cooks. It includes, a lot of seasonal and part-time workers. It includes the single factory worker with 3 kids. So, we really need to think about a wide range of incomes. And I also just want to state that Ontario recognizes housing as a human right. And it's not enough for us to say that the homeless and the people on the housing list or OW or ODSP are social services domain, because if you're developing a community incentive toolkit and a community improvement plan, you're going to be drawing from the same finite pool of municipal resources, including land and grants for this project. So I know that, it was mentioned that someone from social housing is in the working group, but I just want to ask again to make sure that social services and public developers be at the table as secondary stakeholders, and they also have decision-making power so that we don't end up frustrating our ability to house people outside of this project's stated scope. Slide 7, please. So the last 3 pages here explain additional reasons for asking for the project to be extended past the March 31st deadline. I'm running out of time, I realize, so I'm not going to go into depth, but they're there, and I know we've sort of kind of covered, but not fully, some of these things with the update that was given. So these are the things that still need clarifying before stakeholders can propose viable solutions, in my opinion. All stakeholders, but especially primary stakeholders. Slide 8, please. I'm asking that council and the appropriate city staff collaborate on creating some kind of best practices for like a list for best practices for community outreach and engagement to be applied to this project moving forward, as well as other major projects that are in the pipes that are coming down the line. I think it's critical that we get better at accountability, at public consultations, at public engagement. These were big election issues that many of you ran on, and I think we're falling short of how well we can do. I just want to note that on the bottom of that first page, where it's bolded and it says 3 times rule, that should actually read the rule of 7. That's the rule of 7. And slide 9, please. There's another very minor typo here. Community centers and theaters are actually 2 separate bullet points. I just want to close by saying that we're a small community, and for such a small community, 34,000 people, we actually have a considerable amount of resources because of the kinds of industries that we've nurtured here. We should be able to take care of all of our citizens. We should be able to home all of our citizens comfortably. We should be a model for other communities who are looking to do this thing. And if we can't do this well, I'm not sure who can. So I'm appealing to council to do better. I think that we can do better and we should do better. Thank you. It's very quiet. Can you guys hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can. I think our mayor is froze.
Our mayor has what? I'm sorry?
He's frozen right now.
Oh, I see. Okay, I can't see, so I'm just like, what
Okay.
happened?
It looks like he's
Thank you.
left. He'll be coming back and then he'll
But
work.
now we're back. So there you go. Are there questions from council? So once again, thank you very much for the presentation. Next, we'll turn to bringing Jason Davis into the meeting.
Through you, Your Worship, we do not see Jason Davis in the attendee list at this time.
Okay. So well, then while we're waiting, perhaps he'll join us before we leave this item, but there is, maybe we can go forward to the motion with regards to the report.
Through Your Worship, as outlined on your agenda, there is a staff recommendation that the report titled Stratford Attainable Market Housing Project Update be received for information.
Mover for such. Thank you, Councillor Hunter, and Councillor Bean will second that. Councillor Seven, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, is Miss Baker still available for questions, or has that opportunity passed?
I don't know if she is, but certainly if she is available, we'll see if we can.
Or I could ask.
If she is,
Okay,
go,
great.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, through the mayor. I'm just wondering, Ms. Baker, regarding Nicole's comments there, is there opportunity, or could you see opportunity being available for input from what she was referring to as more primary stakeholders or people who are in how or different stages or states of housing or rentals at the moment?
Through the mayor to Councillor Seven, certainly maybe just to provide a little bit of clarity of the consultations to date and their purpose. So certainly there were stakeholder sessions. They were on the same day. There was 2 of them. They were about an hour, hour and a half each, one virtual, one in person. With those mentioned, faith-based, institutional, not-for-profit builders. Essentially, those were for organizations. The intent was to garner their feedback, their perspectives, But a very similar intent was for the public engagement. So there's been a series of public engagement that had a similar type of discussion. So it wasn't that the stakeholder consultations were a different type of discussion or different types of input. They were just broken into two components, one during the day when people are at work, and one more at the evening when the public may be able to participate. So there was a lengthy survey that residents in the community could fill out, as I mentioned, online and in print. There's Engage Stratford, which has project information and Q&As that continue to be open. There was a 3-hour drop-in open house with a number of Invest Stratford staff, city staff, the project team, similar information at the stakeholders. So I did just want to provide some clarity that there has been a public engagement. I certainly appreciate Nicole's perspective that, from her perspective, it hasn't been sufficient to garner the feedback. But I wanted to kind of convey that we do see everybody as a stakeholder, and maybe the terminology was incorrectly used, but we had just broken it down by their interest, their background, and the best time and ability for them to participate. Moving forward, we are launched, I think late last week. We did add some additional consultation that wasn't originally anticipated. There's a landlord survey that's been uploaded to Engage Stratford and social media because, the sense was after that consultation that might have been an area and we unintentionally overlooked. So we've added that to the program. And certainly there's still a public meeting coming up. So there will be recommendations to consider, and all members of the public are invited to hear it and to participate and provide feedback. So I'm not sure if that assists in maybe clarifying the consultation to date.
Yes, thank you.
Anything further? Councillor Briscoe, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Through your worship, for Ms. Baker as well. When we're looking at in the incentive toolkit, a concern with Bill 23 is there's a huge focus on supply and gleaning that we obviously need supply, and it looks like the toolkit's looking to address that and how to maximize that and ways of creatively doing that in Stratford. But the big concern is also the maintenance of current affordable supply, and that's the protections to maintain current supply have been removed under Bill 23 with the rental replacement tool being removed from municipalities. Will the toolkit also provide options for how to maintain our current supply, especially if that's some of our most affordable supply?
Maybe a point of clarification. So certainly within the incentives toolkit, the city is only able to control rules, charges, matters under their purview and jurisdiction. So certainly when it relates to existing affordable housing units, the typically incentive toolkits are to create new units. Now, certainly if there was somebody who owned a unit that wanted to convert it to being affordable, they could be eligible for those incentives. In the past, there's been discussions at council about maintaining affordable rental units. And certainly as the city looks to its new official plan in the future, there are other opportunities within what I'd call the land use planning framework to look at some protection to affordable rental units. So certainly that could be looked at through that process as well.
Thank you. And just as a follow-up, it's obviously we're still, as you mentioned, in the middle of the process from your map. In the final product, will there be kind of a specific kind of section or focus on deeply affordable or affordable, creating deeply affordable supply as a way to address some of the concerns that Nicole really eloquently raised?
Through a community incentive toolkit, and I'm going off of certainly other toolkits that have been prepared in other communities, the toolkit for Stratford has not been finalized yet. We've been in the sort of background data gathering, meeting with individuals and stakeholders. There can be a range of incentives, and what you'll often see in toolkits, and it'll have to be considered as part of this toolkit, is that the affordable units can be eligible for a greater number of incentives. So a way to structure it is you might have, and I'm just going to make up numbers for an example, but you might have 10 different incentives across the city that might be fee reductions. And you can consider an option where an attainable unit gets, and again, I'm just making up numbers. For an example, 3 is eligible for 3, but an affordable project may be eligible for 6 or 7. And so it's a way to put a greater emphasis on that affordable unit.
Thank you. And just a final process question. Are our social, kind of the service deliverers part of the toolkit formation as well? Because the concern is obviously a reduction in fees causes a reduction in services. And one of the lines that we go by is it's not just building a home, it's building the individual, that we can place individuals within a home, but they may not succeed in that environment without services. So is there a process to ensure balance, that we're not removing potential services that would then see individuals succeed in a home?
Certainly. So the working group that's been formed for this project includes the Director of Community Services, the Manager of Housing. We meet monthly and certainly have a lot of conversations about the housing continuum, where attainable and affordable housing and what that service delivery looks like. So excellent question. Thank you.
Councillor McCabe, go ahead.
Am I allowed to speak briefly, or I don't know if that's allowed?
I believe we're past your presentation, Nicole.
Okay. Okay.
Councillor McCabe and then Councillor Bean.
It's certainly become apparent that there seems to be confusion within the population around the scope of this project. And also probably the nature of the grant that underwrites this project. Was this is specifically addressing the attainable part of housing, and probably that's part of the grant process as well. Would that not be true?
Ms. Gerber?
Oh, Ms. Gerber,
I'm sorry. I just saw Ms. Gerber come on, and I can turn it over to or back to you, Ms. Baker.
So why don't I, through the chair, why don't I grab that one? So thank you, Councillor McCabe, for that. The Rural Economic Development Program does fund specific things. And it was the continuum of the Attainable Housing Report from 2021 with specific deliverables around public-private partnerships and the ideas for that, community incentive toolkits to inspire inventory, as well as the, pardon me, as well as the market or the community engagement piece, which is to encourage all individuals in the community, not just those with land or those with the development backgrounds, to be a part of the solution. As Caroline mentioned, basement apartments, secondary use. So we do have to be very clear about the focus of this particular project so that we meet the requirements of the grant. Now, that's not to say the issue as a whole is not important. And as we've tried to be very clear with the Director of Social Services, the Chief Administrative Officer, the Director of Finance, this is a complex conversation and all individuals play their role. So, the questions around supportive housing and service delivery, that will always reside with social services because they are the experts at that. Mm-hmm. This project may not speak specifically to the supportive housing conversation, but that's not to suggest it's not an important one. We got to keep our focus over here, even though the breadth is wide and long, certainly. So I hope that answers the question. And just if I could really quickly, in case anyone was wondering, the deliverables of this project are due by the end of March. I believe this conversation will continue. I think all of you around the screen will enforce that continuation of the conversation. So it certainly is a much bigger conversation to have. We're going to have our piece of it to you by the end of March so that we're in compliance. But I would imagine we're talking about this for a very, very long time, and for sure we should be.
Thank you. And I'm going to go to Councillor Bean. Go ahead.
Thank you. Through the mayor, to Ms. Baker, I believe you mentioned a future public meeting, and I'm just wondering if a date or location has been set. So if people do want to engage from the community, and if it has not been set yet, where will they find that information?
Through the mayor, the date has not been set. It will be held on a council format. So the requirements under the Planning Act, so Community Incentive Toolkit is a plan that can be approved under the Planning Act. It has legal requirements attached to it. And so the public meeting is held at a council session. So we will certainly coordinate with the clerk's department in terms of a date, appropriate notice, and how that's put out. So it'll be on the Engage Stratford and other, it's the town crier, I believe, that the city uses to give public notice.
Okay, thank you. Anything further? So we do have a motion on the floor that the report titled Stratford Attainable Market Housing Project Update be received for information. If there's nothing further, I will call the Madam Clerk.
Through your worship, I just wanted to note we do have Jason Davis now in the attendee list. If we could hear his delegation, and then you could call the question on the motion following.
Thank you very much. That was going to be my next question. And Mr. Davis, if you're there, then the floor is yours.
Unmute.
There you go. Thank you, Jason.
Hi, guys. Sorry about that. Apparently I was watching under my wife's name the entire time until you realized I wasn't there. And then I was like, oh no.
There you go. The floor is yours.
Perfect. Okay, so while we're talking about attainable housing and all that, I know we all met on the campaign trail and we know how big of an issue this was for everyone. So I decided to do a little bit of research into it because as we go by the province is going and with Bill 23 and all that, the argument right now or the statement is we have a shortage of housing. So I decided I'm going to look into that and see just how bad it is, what shortage of housing we have. So I'm going to throw a bunch of numbers at you. Don't worry, there's not going to be a test or anything. I can email all of you a report on this later on a future date. But as of 2011, we had 12,851,821 homes in Ontario. As of 2016, we had 13,400,000, or sorry, that's population. As of 2016, we had 13,448,494 people. As of 2021, we have 14,223,942. That means over 5 years, we added 775,448 people to our population, which means a 5 years difference of 5.8% and a 10-year difference of 9.7% in population. As for housing, in 2011, we had 4,887,508. In 2016, we had 5,169,175. And as of 2021, we have 5,651,648. This means that over the course of 5 years, we have gained 8.6% increase in housing. Over the last 10 years, we've increased the percentage of housing we have by 13.5%. So if you look at our population growth of only 9.7 and the housing growth was 13.5. Now, there are certain outliers we have to look at when we're doing this to say, wow, we've built more houses than we built our population. What could be giving us a shortage of housing? The median age from 2016 to 2022 went from 40.4 to 40.7. So that is not because people are getting older or families are aging. The where's the next part there? The percentage of multi-family homes, so multiple families living in the same home, has steadily increased since 2001, almost up to 3% now, where we started in 2001 at 1.7%. And the average family size in Ontario has maintained pretty steadily at 2.9 per household since 2006. So it's not that houses are getting smaller and people need more homes. It's not that the population has increased beyond their build rates, and it's not that the median age has changed. So according to all outliers, we don't actually have a shortage of housing. We have been consistently building more than we need. So then why from 2016 to 2021 did housing increase by a cost of 202%? The median price for a home in 2016 was $535,931 for Ontario. The median price for a home in 2022 peaked at $1,086,493, a 202% increase in 5 years. In the meantime, as we try to look at what's happening and why we're having this problem and why we're having this discussion today, despite the fact that we don't have a shortage of housing, 31% of all property owners in Ontario own multiple properties. 34.7% of all homes built since 2016 in the province have gone immediately to investors and not to families in need. Some cities right now have as high as 60% of all homes built since 2016 purchased directly by investors. In Stratford specifically, 19% of all homes in Stratford are owned by multi-property owners, and 21% of all homes built since 2016 have gone directly to investors in Stratford, which is well below the median average, but still not great. Now, if we were to look a little bit further into what could be causing this market crisis we have, that we keep calling a housing crisis, the market crisis, there's a couple things that come up. One would be corporations such as LRO, YieldStar, or RealPage is what they called. Now, that was a company created by Jeffrey Roper, who was originally a developer of a director of revenue management at Alaska Airlines before they were arrested for price fixing through the airlines to stop a price war in the airline industry. And then he went off to Eastern Ukraine, came back and started YieldStar. Now, what YieldStar does is they found a way that it used to be when you bought a big multi-property apartment complex, you would try and rent out all of the units. But they found an algorithm, computer-generated algorithm, that found that you would actually make more money by charging the maximum amount possible while maintaining a certain amount of vacancy. And now they found that in the first year of using this new algorithm, they had a 15% higher turnover. That turnover means people losing their homes or leaving their homes because they can't afford it or ending on the streets. But they had a 7.2% increase in revenue. Fast forward 10 years, they now represent 19.7 million homes in the US alone. They represent multiple managing properties in Canada, including ones as close as Brampton. Several of the names you would know is DWL, and the other Canadian company is called Vertical that uses them. And they manage, those are the systems that are being used by a lot of the big multi-property rentals that own even ones in Stratford, where they are now maximizing price in exchange while keeping higher vacancy rates in order to maximize profits. Another thing that's causing this market crisis is Airbnb. I know when we were talking about the short-term rental licensing, I was yelling about this a fair amount. Interesting to know that in 2017 alone, we lost 31,000 long-term rentals to Airbnb and other short-term rentals such as that in just 2017 on itself. Municipalities of 10,000 or less have seen a 60% rise in long-term rentals becoming short-term rentals. For one county, for example, we have Prince Edward County, which has 536 of its 797 rental listings now being short-term rentals. Because of this, in the same 18 months that this short-term rentals exploded over 60%, they saw a 94.6% increase in their cost of housing. It is now $1,817 for a single rent, for a two-bedroom, $1,456 for a bachelor, and $1,078. That's a 94% increase from the year before from Airbnb and short-term rentals. A study in the US from March of 2020 found that a 1% increase in Airbnb listings in a municipality equals a 0.018% increase in rent for the entire municipality and a 0.026% increase in housing cost for the entire municipality. Every percentage of Airbnbs that gets brought in will increase rent and will increase housing costs. Every time. And 1% doesn't seem like much, but when you add 40, 50%, it gets high. So what am I asking for with all this information that I just threw at you in a very quick amount of time? Well, one, I would like you to take this information and use it in future decisions and discussions. Realize that the challenge isn't just building more homes, because we've built more homes now than ever. In 2020, we built 2021, we built the largest number of homes in Ontario that I've seen on record, with over 99,000 new unit startups in 1 year. The average annually is 67,500. So we're building way more homes. That's not the problem. Building market homes is not helping. The only homes we can build need to be set at attainable rates or affordable rates or non-market housing, because market housing, the market itself is the problem right now. It's not a lack of homes. So what am I asking you to do specifically with all of this information? The first thing I'm asking is that you do not sell any municipally owned land cleared for development to developers. Owning that land allows you the ability to do whatever with it, right? It can be anything. It can be homes at any price point. But the second you sell it, even if you make agreements for 10% to be affordable or 20% to be affordable, there are ways to wiggle around it. And once you don't own it, you don't own it. If you own the land and develop yourself or hire developers or work for non-for-profits to build them, and then have homes that you own as a municipality, you can do targeted population growth, which means we want a walk-in clinic in Stratford. We go to a doctor that's recently become licensed, isn't making the big money yet, and you say, we have a home for $350,000 for you and your family because we know you're just starting out and you can't afford an $800,000 home. You take this home and you start a walk-in clinic in Stratford. Do it with nurses, ECEs, ECAs, anything you want. Targeted population growth is possible when you own the property. If not, it goes to the highest bidder, and the highest bidder isn't always what the community needs. The second thing I'm asking is, in this project, what's going to eventually come up is people are going to say, okay, we are going to give money to landlords or give money to homeowners in order to do renovations to create apartments where they weren't before that are attainable. Places like someone's basement could be renovated and turned into a separate apartment. That's what's going to happen. Most of Perth is discussing it. Most of Ontario is discussing it, honestly. And in that at that time, what I would like to request is that the cap that you put the prices at is $1,200 for a 2-bedroom unit, $1,000 for a 1-bedroom unit, or $600 per room with shared living spaces. That is enough that even starting families can afford. Someone working minimum wage can afford a room, or 2 people working minimum wage living together can afford a single room. That's enough to get working families here. And that's still, if let's say you give $10,000 to the homeowner to develop their basement, and then they get $1,200 a month for the 10-year contract, let's say it's on, at the end of the 10 years, they made $150,000. That's not nothing, while still providing us our needs.
1 minute, Jason, okay?
Yep.
Thank you. So do you want to finish up, Jason?
No, that was actually literally the end.
Oh, thank you very much.
No
Thank
problem.
you. Well
Thanks for
timed.
listening.
Thank you so much. Questions from council for Mr. Davis? Councillor Henderson and then Councillor Briscoe.
Those were very interesting stats that you brought up to light. Hopefully you'll feel free to share them with our MPP and ask him his questions about what you're asking basically for Ontario about, is there really a lack of housing or just a lack of affordable housing or attainable housing, which is what we all suspect is the problem. And I would really appreciate it if you do email us all that information. Thank you so much for taking the time to put that all together. It was very surprising, some of the stats that you found. I was sort of in shock in some of them. Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, thanks. I'll definitely get that all to you this week. Like, my family currently has, between the flu and a bunch of other stuff, so I'm a little out of it today. I was hoping to have it ready for you this week, but I'll definitely be sending it out to you with graph data and all that, so it's very easy to intake the information in the near future.
Thank you. Councillor Briscoe, go ahead.
Thank you, through your worship. Wonderful presentation, clear, great numbers, incredibly informative to us, but to the population at large. So thank you very much for that. I would also encourage to continue your research at the University of Ottawa. That you currently are running a project called Debunking the Supply Myth, which mirrors all the research you've done, as well as looking at the increase in various populations that have offset our rental market, which dovetails well with what you've explained. And one point of clarification, in your ask of not to sign over to developers, which is something a number of especially not-for-profit and social service providers are also asking. The not-for-profit builder space, a lot have kind of entered into partnership agreements in that space where the not-for-profit builds and then the social service organization comes alongside to run services within. And a tool that's been used by cities in those scenarios is leveraging the contracted first right of refusal for a city to purchase that unit or development or whatever it may be, so that should they need to increase their supply, they then have the opportunity to have that purchase come back to the city, which is something certainly to be explored. And if that was something you were considering, but just wanting clarification on your recommendation if not-for-profit developers were kind of under that umbrella request, or if there was some variance there.
Oh yeah, working with non-for-profits is obviously like, yeah, like a lot of times working with non-for-profits, though, they're not going to request ownership of the property from my understanding. And so that's really where it comes down to, right? Like, because you can just follow that one dead line. Do not sell municipally owned land that's cleared for development to anyone. Sell homes instead, because then you have so much more control. You can have targeted population growth. You can control the prices. You control the size. Everything I talk, like, I don't have to sit here and tell all you guys the things I yelled about during my campaign. You were all there beside me when I've been like, guys, this guy's yelling a lot about this thing. You all heard it. I don't need to tell you that. But the key real thing is just make sure we keep ownership. Do not release ownership, because as long as you have ownership, you have control.
Thank you. Anything further? Thanks for the presentation, Jason. We appreciate it.
Thank you. You guys have a good night.
Thank you. So we'll turn back to the clerk with regards to the staff recommendation and the motion.
Through your worship, it is my understanding there's a motion on the floor that was moved by Councillor Hunter and seconded by Councillor Bean, and it is that the report titled Stratford Attainable Market Housing Project Update be received for information.
Thank you. Motion by. Thank you, Councillor Niger, second by Councillor Henderson. I see the clerk. Yes, go ahead.
Through your worship, the motion was moved
That
and
was
seconded.
passed already. I apologize. Yes. So all in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's unanimous. Thank you.
Item 7.2 is a resolution regarding the Stratford Sport Tourism Strategy. And as outlined on the agenda, staff representatives from Invest Stratford and the consultant Destinate Group will provide a presentation on the strategy.
Ms. Gerber, I'll turn it over to you for introductions and then we'll take it away.
Thank you very much. Through your worship, thank you again to Council for providing us this opportunity, switching gears a little bit into the Stratford Sport Tourism Strategy. Again, you have the background and the report in your package. We're very pleased to have the team from Destinate Group here, the consultant that has worked with us, as well as the working group of City and Destination Stratford and Invest Stratford that have been toiling through this since August. Very quickly, I just wanted to remind this council that this was one of the final strategic plan priorities of the council's 2018 to 22 strategic plan. So we're happy to check this off the list. And without further ado, please, I will turn it over to Todd Brandt and Laurie Sly from Destinate Group to walk you through the strategy, and then happy to answer any questions following that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the invitation, Your Worship and Council, and the opportunity to present the highlights of what we learned as we spent time in and talked a lot to the community of Stratford about their interests and ambitions around the world of sport tourism, which is something that, just like any destination in Canada now, looking at opportunities to fortify and build back better around tourism. So the team that was involved in this include Laurie Sly, who's our principal with Destinate. She's also an excellent business and marketing professional. Steve Nickel, who's joining us from Vancouver. Steve is an analyst, and he's kind of our numbers guru. So a lot of the information baked out there was due to Steve's hard work. And myself, I'm in Saskatoon joining you. And I worked in the tourism field and was honored in I'd like to say the turn of the century, but it was around the year 2000. I chaired a national committee to create what was called the Canadian Sport Tourism Alliance at the time, to develop a toolkit. You talked about a toolkit at your meeting earlier around the world of sport tourism. So happy to have Stratford kind of join the opportunities there. So when we, just to reiterate some of the purposes and the outcomes of what was done here, really, as I said before, all destinations are looking at how to grow back better post-COVID. We're looking for resiliency and waiting for the next interruption and how we can better weather the storm when those occasions happen. Sport tourism is really about economic growth. We really did learn about the issues around seasonality in Stratford and area, and things that the nice, beautiful thing about sport tourism, it's very granular. You can find business for when and how you want, the numbers, everything can be modified to best fit the already vibrant cultural community of Stratford, but fill in the blanks. And I was enthusiastically listening to your attainable housing program, because we really felt that, you know, you've got a lot of workers that are occupying accommodations that are originally designed for tourists and visitors to come in, but they're being occupied by travelers because there's not enough tourism business. Well, we're hoping that sport tourism will help accommodation providers deal with visitors and tourists, while other workers, and the tourism industry is fraught with challenges around attracting staff and getting them gainfully employed. All the things that you're doing in Stratford are going to help align around there. So you already have a sport tourism industry in Stratford. The strategy that we created was really about how to create better alignment, better communications, so that it can expand and start to develop business during need periods. So we undertook a fairly comprehensive engagement strategy. We're thrilled to have almost 300 individuals that we dealt with over time. So starting with our steering committee and then reaching out to various stakeholders and just the general public. We held workshops, a public open house, a number of focus group meetings and discussions, and a number of one-on-one interviews, which included your Mayor Aritzna and a number of councillors as well. So we pulled that all down into the summary plan and the draft plan that we're presenting you tonight is kind of, we hope it is reflective of the wishes and interests of the community, because they were considerable. We want to talk a little bit about the impact of the sport tourism industry in Canada. I'm going to hand it over to Steve to review this slide with you on the size of the sport tourism opportunity and what we learned about Stratford in some of our analysis. Steve?
Thanks, Todd. Sport tourism is a significant part of the visitor economy in this country. 7.4 billion nationally, 2.7 billion in Ontario. This is 2019, before the pandemic. Things have obviously dipped down a bit, but we're recovering. And sports tourists tend to spend more both domestically and internationally. So it's a very attractive market to sort of seek for communities and destinations, you know, across the country. The reason the spending is higher is because the groups tend to be larger and they tend to stay longer in a community when they come to an event. And so what does Stratford need in order to do a better job at attracting sports events and sports tourism? Well, you need some of the obvious things, such as sports venues and facilities, which we do have. We have a good roster of indoor and outdoor facilities. We also need a hospitality industry, because that's where the economic impacts go. We need the accommodators, we need food and beverage operators, we need transportation providers, we need retail services. So as visitors come into the community and they spend their money, that's where the impacts are going. I'm just going to talk about, apologies ahead of time, I live beside a fire hall. So the hotel motel occupancies, that's an important metric for our tourism industry. And we've been hit hard in Stratford and RTO4 since 2019. We were at around 63-64% occupancy up until 2019. We're slowly crawling back, but one of the advantages of sports tourism, as Todd mentioned, is we can be very strategic about when those events occur and when visitors actually come into the community. So that leads me into my third point here, which is this is probably one of the more ideal markets for spreading out, for increasing your shoulder and off-season visitation and spending, what I would call your seasonal dispersion. And of course, you can determine that down to the day in the week, because you know when the event is occurring. So again, it can be very strategic. So what are some of the impacts that you get when you hold a sporting event? And I'll just refer, in our report, we've talked about 3 different case studies that we profiled. And one of them, which was the under 21 Canadian Curling Championships, which was held last year in Stratford. And the impacts on sports tourism they're in 3 different areas, but I'm just going to talk about 2 of them here. It's the event hosts themselves, which spend operating money conducting the event. But the big impact is on visitor spending. And so that's where the majority of the impacts were for the curling championship. $700,000 in spending, 8 person-years of employment. There were more individual jobs, but most of those, as you can appreciate, were very short-term jobs. But 8 person-years of employment is quite significant. And $200,000 in taxes to all levels of government. So that money, when it comes into the community, of course, is going to those tourism businesses, the accommodators and the food and beverage businesses and whatnot. Also, value of tourism hours and volunteer time that goes into really driving the operation of these events. $54,000 for that 1 week alone. Exposure of Stratford as a destination to new visitors. So one of the interesting aspects about sport tourism, and you can go back through the Sports Tourism Council surveys across the country over the last 10 years. And what happens is most visitors during a sporting event would not have come to the community without that event. In other words, they're what we call incremental visitors. So it's a way to increase your exposure and try to get repeat visitation from those visitors. So it can be a marketing tool for the community and for the local tourism economy as well. And then, of course, there's the social benefits that come along with sports tourism through increased sports participation, healthy lifestyles, better health outcomes, an overall quality of life that you get when you increase active, participation in sporting activities. Now, there's also, when we talk about economics, there's also potentially adverse impacts. Then there are some that we have to be aware of, and we talk about these in the strategy. And I'm speaking specifically here about the need for community-wide coordination when you're conducting sporting events so that you minimize the adverse effects on our resident and the local, especially youth participants who are using those facilities. So it can be done, but if you can do it properly, then the economic impacts are highly measurable and can give you a really positive cost-benefit outcome.
Great. Thank you, Steve. In summary, we came up after looking at the SWOT analysis, all the inputs that were coming together and what we know it would take to move the mark and for sport tourism in Stratford. We really boiled down to 7 strategic priorities with a number of tactics underneath each of them. First one, somebody needs to have the sport tourism file in the middle of their desk every day. Everybody does their best, it's on the side, but if you have an entity that will be created that worries about driving sport tourism, it's how to move the mark and move forward. And that includes really 2 components. You've got some really good senior leadership in the sport community, but also in facilities and the cultural community. Those are the groups that need to come together to create a new entity, a committee that will initially be managed through Destination Stratford. And you need to provide some staff support in order to drive things forward. So great to have the senior leadership and the senior volunteers, but you also need boots on the ground to make things happen. That doesn't happen without funding. So the next strategy really is about developing and executing a funding plan from numerous sources, typically facilities, accommodators, sport groups or entities themselves, corporations, groups like the City of Stratford. All those entities can come together as a collaborative approach to develop the funding framework so that things can continue to move forward without a huge onus on any one entity. And, great to have the RTO4 funding for this stage of the game. I would expect they would be interested in the implementation phase as well. They came to the workshops we had. This is, as Steve had mentioned, creating a sector-wide communication framework and also reaching beyond that. So the sport community needs to know what the cultural community needs to know what the business community, having some type of centralized framework with modern or available software, being able to pull all that together as kind of a central clearinghouse, and not just for what's happening this week in Stratford, but what's happening a year from now. Where are the ambitions? And being able to then avoid the conflicts where too much stuff is happening at one time, and filling in the gaps, I think, is critical. Strategically, there is a lot of competitions for sport events and sport business meetings. So once the committee is up and established, taking a hard look at the strategically which markets best suit Stratford. And you've gone through the entire document. You might want to work in the LGBTQ community. You might want to deal with people that are that focus on certain sports, or collectively a bunch of different ones. So there's various strategic markets within their corporate events are highlighted amongst them as well. And we do spell out in the document what type of opportunities they are strategically. So identifying from that, then, once you've rifled your targets, then you go after the events. And I don't want Stratford to forget about the fact that sport business meetings are huge. You're beautifully located, 2 hours from so many people in Toronto, and a great retreat center. So sport business meetings, retreats for sport associations, and that sort of group, you're very well fit up for that sort of thing. At some point in time, an analysis of the facility needs that are there that would best support other events. And we know that you have a busy festival season, your peak travel season, you're pretty full with business. But what other facilities would help encourage and bring new business to Stratford in that shoulder and off season that Steve mentioned? Thrilled to hear that you've got a stadium, a dome stadium going up this winter. We'll see how that works out. What opens the door to that, or other sports that might want to do similar things without an inordinately huge cost. And finally, I think as a community and as a city, taking a look at the overall hosting framework, the environment for encouraging sport tourism events does get articulated in city policies and programs and guidelines. And I think a review of those can certainly help open the door and encourage that high level of senior volunteers to come forward and put their hand up and say, I'm going to try to secure this event for Stratford. And if we secure it, we're going to pull it off in fine fashion and reflect positively on the Stratford brand and the destination. So there's a series of things around those 7 priorities. They all interrelate. Certainly had a good conversation with the person that's worked on your cultural tourism strategy. And, you know, there's a lot of overlap and positive linkages between that strategy and what's happening here. Had good communications with, you look at staffing, you know, restaurateurs that go from 130 peak staff in the summer to 40 in the winter just to keep the doors open. That's hugely difficult for businesses to have that kind of flow of staff in and out with training and recruitment issues. So there's so many opportunities that extend beyond just sport that will be good for Stratford. And it was a real pleasure working with your team of the steering committee that helped us, and through Joni. And it was really a pleasure for me to get into Stratford for my first experience, and enjoyed your community. And thank you very much for the confidence shown in us to create the strategy.
Thank you so much, Todd, Steve, and Lori. I was happy to be part of one of those sessions, so thank you very much. I'm going to look to council to see if there's any questions from council. Councillor Hunter, please go ahead, and then Councillor Burback.
Thank you. Through your worship, if we proceed with this plan, what's a reasonable time frame to get to positive revenue?
Through your worship, you know, just getting that group rolling and functional is going to take, you know, six months, I would hope. And then when you look at the framework, the looking forwards, most events, small regional events, 6 months before you start getting return on that. But large events, they're planned and secured 3 to 4 years out. So it really is being patient enough to let it ramp up, make sure the positive indicators are there, and looking for any short turnaround opportunities that there might be. We talked about what else is happening in your nearby communities and in Cambridge and Waterloo and that. Is there a circuit of events that could immediately move into Stratford in a new partnership with them? So you do have to have some patience, but yeah, it'll take a few years to get fully operational.
Thank you.
Councillor Burback.
Thank you. Through the mayor, I have a few questions. The first one I think is for Mr. Brandt. The answer to the question might be no, but I'm wondering if is it possible to estimate how much economic activity will be generated, let's say 5 years down the road, because we did see that the cost breakdown for the next 5 years and what we're putting into it. But I'm just curious if there's any rough numbers as to what the economic impact would be on the community over those 5 years.
Through the worship, in response to the mayor, to respond to that question, we didn't really do projections out. I know that in Saskatoon, which is about a magnitude size, our sport tourism industry is $52 million a year, give or take. On big years, it can be quite a bit more than that. So if you look at 4 or 5 years down the road, once things are really churning along, if you're generating 5 million in economic activity annually, that employs a lot of people, you know, supports some business taxes, you know, it's good for the community. Plus the growth of anything related to the sports side, if it helps the cultural side, you know, that just supports the Stratford brand for sure.
Great, thank you. I think my next question is probably for the Director of Community Services. And we had a little bit of a discussion about this on the weekend, but I'm concerned a little bit about how the community currently uses our facilities. And we talked a little bit about the master recreation plan. So a couple of years ago, that was also brought forward to council as something that's really important to do, for us to take an inventory of what the city's resources are, what our recreational needs are locally, and how they might intersect. So I see like 0.6 in the plan seems to be pointing towards that type of analysis, but to me, it seems a little bit more important that we figure out where we're at as far as how the facilities are being, or we need to use the facilities, how they're being used, what needs to be added as far as the community. So in my mind, the community would be also a priority. And I'll let you answer the question.
Director Wolf, go ahead.
Through your worship, in answering that, I guess the big one too is to understand the current needs of the facilities. We definitely don't want to we have a lot of user groups currently that we don't want to step in their feet either and work collaboratively with them. We are looking at study to see what our current use of the facilities are. And, you know, I know the leisure recreation plan should be something we'd be updating. But in the same breath, we also have some resources to get some information together to get a lens of the current use of all our facilities, see what's available, where we can utilize spaces that maybe aren't being used. And I think that would be the direction we go. And current use of our facilities now too is to ensure that, you know, we're addressing all infrastructure to make sure that we're equipped and ready. So 4 or 5 years down the road, these big events, we're going to be gung ho and take these on and be able to host these bigger events as well.
Great, thank you,
Councilor Burbach.
Yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for that. And I'm just glad that it's on your radar because I think it's really important for the community. If I may, could I ask one more question?
Sure.
This one of probably, I don't know if Mr. Gribble is here or maybe Ms. Gerber can answer this. So in the motion, it talks about the tourism advisory committees of Destination Stratford. I just like to have a little bit more information about what those tourism advisory committees are, who's on them, and how are those people selected?
Mr. Gribble.
Through your worship, the tourism advisory committees, there are 4 of them. They each are comprised of 10 individuals. There are tourism advisory committees for accommodation, restaurant and culinary, retail, and festivals and events. We all met late in the fall individually. In terms of the selections, these are all volunteers that have come in. We did invite, and that was very intentional to make sure that we had a very full spectrum within each of those subsectors. Fortunately, we had a lot of people who were eager to participate. I think the intention here is to draw upon the knowledge from those particular tourism advisory committees, but really to strike a sport tourism advisory committee that would pull together a lot of the individuals that have been mentioned in this presentation. So these would all work harmoniously together as centers of expertise. But the net new item before you that we can move on right away is the creation of a sport tourism advisory committee to begin the process of implementing and finding out things like funding strategy. What are the low-hanging fruit? You had also mentioned about capacity and not offsetting existing user groups. There are some case studies in this sport tourism strategy that are very interesting in that they don't actually use facilities. And there's a lot of things around cycle tourism and marathons and various other things that we can be very creative about, that as we build capacity within our infrastructure, there's no reason why we can't be going after sport events that make sense for the seasonality and our capacity of the hospitality industry.
Thank you, Zach. Ms. Gerber, did you want to add anything? I saw you came on the screen.
I'm okay. Zach summed it up very well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further from council? Councillor Henderson.
Yes, I was wondering, I'm assuming we're taking this into account, but I remember, we had the Dairy Expo, and then he came forth with another idea, and the user groups were very upset about that because they use the Rotary complex for different things and there wasn't going to be enough room. And I guess what Jody was alluding to is the fact of, if we were trying to attract something for hockey or something, or even baseball or whatever, well, not in this winter, it wouldn't be baseball, but skiing or whatever. Like, do we actually have the room, or would we have to bump user groups out? Because I know we have to at some point now. Like, I remember that time we won, what was it, hockey night in Canada. We had to, hockey teams had to be moved around. I think some even had to go out of town or something. So I guess what I'm looking for in the report is if we have enough room to actually do this. Maybe in the winter, something that's outside, but.
Director Wolf, go ahead.
Through you, Your Worship. As well, I think what we have to look at, Councillor Henderson, is it's not always going to be a baseball or hockey theme, right? So we can look at other sports that maybe aren't the traditional, maybe I call them the top three of soccer, baseball, hockey. There's also, opportunities of broomball. That's one. Cricket. And I think that's where the strategy also is looking at, is look outside the walls as well, that we don't just think those certain events. In saying that, when we look at those events of hockey, if there's a potential of bringing in a big event, there needs to be a huge communication with their user groups to make sure that they are aware of it and that we can work collaboratively on that. So I'm sure they'll be just as happy to see a high-end event come in, but in the same breath, we've got to take that into account that we're not stepping on their toes as well.
Thank you. Councillor Seven, I saw your hand.
Thank you. Through the mayor, I did have, I guess, following up on Councillor Burbach's questions for Mr. Gribble. I was just wondering, regarding the tourism advisory committees and their role in informing, I'm just wondering, would there be an opportunity for additional participation if somebody was interested or if individuals are interested? And then you had mentioned sort of rolling that into an advisory committee for sports tourism. And if that was created, would that, and I don't know if this is a question if this part is for Mr. Gribble or if that's more for maybe Mr. Director Wolf, but would that then become more of a city advisory committee and then follow how those are created and the terms of reference? I guess.
Mr. Gribble, go ahead, and then perhaps if it's a question around the other piece, maybe turn it over to our clerk for input on that.
Thank you for the question through the mayor. The terms, I think part of the initial planning will be to develop all of that and to get wide input. The larger the table, I think the better in terms of community involvement. So there isn't a prescriptive solution that I could share with you today in terms of how will this be formed. But I think that's the work of the steering committee here, and also the initial sport tourism advisory committee is what should this entity look like? The recommendations within the sport tourism strategy are an arm's length organization from the city, initially being housed for economies of scale, quite frankly, at Destination Stratford, so that it has its best chance to evolve. But I think that the entities will naturally form in terms of those that are most motivated and those that can move the needle. And certainly in the early stages, people that are interested would be asked to join that table to give us input into how this should look and how it should be formed. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Anything further? Councillor Burback, go ahead.
Thank you, through the mayor. It's probably, maybe it's follow up from what Councillor Seven was saying, but I did have some people that are accommodators that reached out to me, and they're very interested in this plan, but they're also very interested in having some input and being consulted, because accommodations are a huge part of making this successful. So when I read through and I saw the sports tourism task force or task group or whatever, I didn't see mention in there of accommodators. So I just wanted to make a note that I think it's really important that we have some people representing accommodation to be part of that task force moving forward, and just to flag that they would be a really important stakeholder group.
Thank you. Councillor Seven, a follow-up?
Thank you. I just wanted to sort of pick up where Councillor Hunter and Henderson mentioned, and I guess my question is for Mr. Brandt. I'm just wondering, as far as return on investment, and then Councillor Henderson's question on whether we can sort of accommodate these without disruption to our existing groups. And the return on investment, is that more based on taking on like bigger sort of events where we would have to invest in more infrastructure to accommodate the bigger events? I guess my concern is that if we're investing sort of money to create this program, and then year over year sort of investing in the office and things, will we have to invest more into it to get more out of it? Or if we aren't willing to sort of disrupt our groups a little bit more and build more infrastructure for the bigger events, will the return on investment will it be realized in the same way? I hope that's not too much there, but.
Mr. Brandt, go ahead.
To the mayor, thank you for the question, Councillor Seven. Yeah, you have to look at every opportunity to where do you have accommodation? Where do the accommodations, where do they need business? You focus on events that could come in there. You look at international events and the per day spending of international visitors, but not all international events are big or audacious. But if they bring special interests into the community from international venues, the spending patterns are significant. They're very important, and it can certainly add to the ROI. As well, I think in the initial, we had a lot of input from the sport groups themselves about facility needs and a huge wish list. I get that, that's normal. But at the same time, where is the capacity now? We know it's spring, fall, and certainly winter. What sport groups can fill that? And lots of times you don't have to build facilities just to bring business. Talking to the curling clubs and court groups and that, they need business midweek in the winter, despite them, what times of day. So where do pickleballers come in? Can you bring in a tournament locally organized with 100 pickleballers from a Monday to Wednesday? That's pure gold when your facility is empty and your rooms aren't busy. And that's my point about being granular. You can find or develop events that create that return without displacement of existing activities. And we were really actually excited to see the number of sporting groups and the pressure around facilities. There is going to be times where you're going to have to say as a council, we need to develop or enhance this facility. And it's going to accommodate these three groups and these four events that might come. I understand that. But I think you can do a lot of growth with very little capital infrastructure right now by being strategic. And the point about their strategy 3 is communication, communication, communication. If everybody knows what's happening and when, you avoid people tripping over each other. You avoid embarrassment by people coming to a cultural event when a big sporting event's happening and not finding accommodation. So those are the efficiencies that come through that communication strategy. So I hope I answered some of your question, Councillor.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor McCabe, go ahead.
I think this is coming at an interesting time. And if we're talking about it for this last weekend, we had and I'm not even sure, one of the big problems that we have in Stratford is the tourism industry is never aware of events. So there was a hockey tournament this weekend. When you layer that upon cultural events, all of a sudden you have a pretty compelling thing. It was our busiest in our business. The busiest day we've ever had was last Saturday. That's in January in Stratford because of the layering of a sporting event, which we didn't know about, but we were happy to have there. And the Lights on Stratford is an ongoing event. I think there's something interesting in that combination of things. And it doesn't, to the point which I think has been made regarding the continuity of business functioning, it doesn't have to be major things that we're talking about here. I don't think, in fact, that you want a lot of those. But if you have a more consistent functioning tourism industry, it's going to be beneficial across the board, both for the industry and for the community at large. So communication is really the part where we never seem to be able to communicate about what's happening in Stratford, or the organizations who are involved with sports do not communicate through the tourism agency, which hopefully that will be corrected in this kind of instance.
Thank you. Councillor McCabe, anything further? Seeing none, I will once again thank Todd, Lori, and Steve for their work, and we truly appreciate it. And I'm sure this is a good start for things to come. So thank you very much. And I'll turn it back to the clerk. We have a staff recommendation.
Through your worship, as noted on the agenda, there is a staff recommendation that the existing Sport Tourism Steering Committee, being the Community Services Department, Destination Stratford, and Invest Stratford, remain active, and that the Tourism Advisory Committees of Destination Stratford be leveraged to inform and support the creation of the Stratford Sport Tourism Office, and that the steering committee explore funding opportunities and partnerships to create an organizational structure and funding model for inclusion in the City of Stratford's 2024 budget.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Beattie, thank you, and second by Councillor Briscoe, thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Sabin, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify. So if we move this, are we committing to the creation of the Stratford Sport Tourism Office?
I'll turn it back to the clerk.
Through you, your worship, it's my understanding the intent of the motion is simply to inform and support the creation of a Stratford Sport Tourism Office. I do not believe any firm commitments are being made at this time, but I would look to our CEO of Invest Stratford or our Director of Community Services just to clarify and confirm next steps.
And I'm getting a thumbs up from the CAO from Invest Stratford. Thank you.
Okay. And
Councillor
through the
Sabin.
mayor, if I could follow up. So then it's my understanding, just for clarity, that this will come to council for the 2024 budget to, at that point, we would decide on the creation and moving forward at that stage. Is that when that will return to council?
I'm saying yes, and perhaps I can turn it over to our Director of Corporate Services with regards to the next steps for the 2024 budget. Or the clerk, I see your hand as well.
Through you, your worship, yes, that's my understanding. Again, the steering committee will explore funding opportunities and partnerships to create an organizational structure and funding model for inclusion in the City of Stratford 2024 budget. At that time, committee would consider any proposal put before and then would need to decide to add it into the 2024 budget or approve it. And again, that would still be required to go through at least a two-step process, being committee and council.
Great, thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Anything further? Seeing none, that's been moved and seconded, and I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Next item.
Through your worship, item 7.3 is a resolution regarding the annual Ministry of Transportation fire response rate increase, and there is a staff recommendation that Schedule F of the Fees and Charges Bylaw 128-2022 be amended to increase the MTO rate from $509.89 to the new MTO rate of $543.03 for the fees noted on your agenda.
A mover for that item. Thank you, Councillor Seven, and second by Councillor Niger. Questions? Seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? And that's unanimous. Thank you.
Item 7.4 is a resolution regarding the William Allman Memorial Arena Sound System RFP. And there is a staff recommendation that the request for proposals for the supply and installation of a new sound system for the William Allman Memorial Arena be awarded to CP Stoneman Inc. at a total proposal price of $75,145, including HST. And that the Recreation Capital Reserve Fund be used to provide the funding required in the amount of, and I would note there is a correction to this amount. The amount is $66,500 after the HST rebate.
So is there a mover with regards to this motion and the corrected amount? Thank you, Councillor Burbach, second by Councillor Henderson. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Item 7.5 is a resolution regarding the removal of a holding provision for lands located at 4117 Perth Line 36. And there is a staff recommendation that zoning bylaw 10-2022 as amended be further amended by removing the holding provision H22 from the property municipally known as 4117 Perth Line 36 for the following reasons. The conditions outlined in the holding provision when the H can be removed have been satisfied. Removal of the holding provision will allow for development in conformity with the City of Stratford official plan, and removal of the holding provision is consistent with the provincial policy statement.
Thank you. A mover for 7.5. Thank you, Councillor Hunter. A seconder, Councillor McCabe. Thank you. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's unanimous. Thank you.
Item 7.6 is a resolution regarding consideration of a return to in-person meetings, and there is a staff recommendation that direction be given on whether the following meetings should return to in-person beginning February 6, 2023, that being council and committee, subcommittee, and advisory committee.
Questions or comments or direction from council? Councillor Seven, go ahead.
Thank you. Could I, through the mayor, could I just ask staff if there are any updates regarding the repair of the elevator?
Thank you. I will turn to our CAO, Ms. Thompson.
My apologies. Through your worship, in response to the question, the elevator company continues to work on the elevator, and once that work is finished, we will be scheduling with the TSSA. I cannot give you a date at this point, but we are getting much closer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions, or is there a recommendation that's coming from council? Councillor Henderson, go ahead, please.
Well, I read the report and I know it's really important that we get back to meeting in person, but like when you're talking between $3,500 and $5,000 a meeting, So we have at least 2 council meetings a month. We have 5 subcommittee meetings. We have around 20 advisory and committees. Like there's over 30, but I mean, some of them don't meet at City Hall, like the Health Unit doesn't, the Spruce Lodge, etc. They don't, or the Festival Hydro. That's quite a bit of money that we could put towards housing or other projects, especially when we've done this now for a long time. And people seem to be able to come on and participate, and they can participate by internet or by watching on Rogers like they did before. And I feel like we're actually having more people participate by doing it this way. There's the odd time, like when we have a big presentation, you know, if people are upset about something, you know, the gallery used to be filled, but you know, the average people that used to come to council all the time ran from what, 3 to about 10 people, maybe, if we were lucky, you know, even during budget. So I think that's a lot of money to be paying out in case, I mean, what if we spend all that money and then we're able to start meeting in March? That's just my points on it.
So to that end, certainly we can mitigate the total cost by, we don't have to, moving forward, go to all in-persons for all of the ones that are listed there, council and committee, and then the next one is subcommittee and advisory. We can pick and choose. And the other piece is if we do have the opportunity to come back into chamber, then that would end that piece and we would be back in chamber.
Well, to follow up with that, I think that's, if we're only going to have our council meetings there, which is twice a month, and then the area has to be left set up, then we're losing, we might as well have it for everybody and fill the space, you know, with all the committee meetings rather than letting it sit there empty, what, the other 28 days of the month.
Thank you. Councilor Burbank, I did see your hand, and Councilor McCabe.
Thank you. Through the mayor, just some comments. I was wondering about the possibility of having advisory committees starting to meet in person. I don't know if all the committees are this way, but the ones that I've participated in the past either took place at the Rotary Complex or at the Annex building. So there are other locations where advisory committees can run in person. So I'm wondering, maybe asking the clerk if those locations, is there enough capacity at those locations where we could run advisory committee groups in person?
Turn it to the clerk. Thank you. Councilor Burbank.
Through you, your worship, I don't have any information on the rooms available at 82 Erie. I do note that booking rooms at the Rotary Complex is becoming increasingly difficult. Some of our advisory committees that meet not necessarily at city facilities are also experiencing difficulty. So my recommendation would likely be to move advisory committee meetings to the Rotary Complex. And again, we need to make sure that when we return in person, there is sufficient space, not only for the advisory committee members, but any members of the public that want to attend. But there certainly would be some, such as the Accessibility Advisory Committee, they could resume their meetings at the Annex building, subject to the room being available.
Thank you. I saw Councilor McCabe and then Henderson and Niger.
Are we consider, just as an observation, it seems like there is more participation through Zoom than you are getting in person for these meetings. Are we looking at a longer term solution that involves a hybrid model for some of these meetings?
I'll turn to the clerk.
Through you, your worship. So in council chambers, we have installed an additional camera, which would allow us to live stream our meetings with respect to a true hybrid model, which would allow, for example, some members of council to participate in chambers versus some participating remotely. That one will be a bit difficult just due to our constraints right now, and we would need to, again, relook at the technology in the space. But once we're back in person, we can certainly live stream the meeting so members of the public could watch through Rogers or through the live stream that we'll be setting up, or in person.
Follow up, Councilor McCabe.
To the mayor, to the clerk. I guess from my standpoint, with everybody else moving to somewhat work from home or flexibility in the way that they do things, and encouraging more participation in some of these advisory committees that we're having a difficult time getting people to participate in, it seems to me that maybe flexibility in meetings is a real, it could be something that is worth looking at in the future.
Thank you. Councillor Niger and then Councillor Briscoe.
Thank you, through the mayor. Have we considered, I believe it was brought up previously too, setting up another area, maybe at the Rotary, to have this type of infrastructure in place? Majority of the infrastructure, I believe, is already there with the wireless infrastructure and the networking and that kind of pieces. If the cost may not be as much as we're considering, if we set up a projector, TV, camera area that we can leave set up for other venues as well.
No, send that back to the clerk. Thank you.
Through you, your worship. So if council will recall, at the January 9th council meeting, a resolution was adopted giving direction to staff to explore a secondary location for council meetings that could be accessible and permanent. Staff are going to be beginning that investigation as soon as possible. Due to other priorities and just resource constraints, we haven't started that conversation, but we will be gathering necessary departments to identify available options, which could include the Rotary Complex or alternative sites.
Thank you. Councillor Briscoe.
Thank you. Through your worship, building on Councillor McCabe's points about the flexible work and attracting individuals, also just, is there potential to just create just a hybrid contingency plan moving forward? Obviously, with there's time to work on that in a later priority because staff have a number of priorities, but is there a way to develop a long-term hybrid strategy? The building is aging, heavens forbid there's another elevator issue, but that way that we can more seamlessly move to a hybrid model that accommodates both should another problem arise in the future.
Madame Defoe.
Through your worship, yes, those conversations would certainly be included in our secondary location discussion. There are just specific constraints in council chambers which make hybrid models a little bit difficult. Even this evening, having 3 computers set up creates a feedback. So we would need to explore that so that all members of council wouldn't have to be on a Zoom screen and then having certain images displayed for the gallery. So they're in council chambers is just a bit more difficult involved, but we will certainly be looking at it in the long term.
Thank you, Councillor Briscoe. Councillor Hunter.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was initially not in favor of continuing with the Zoom meetings, but partly because being new to council and wanting to interact with fellow councillors. But as we've progressed through this, I think they've been working fairly well. And I take Councillor Henderson's point that it is costly. I would like to see a long-term solution that's an alternate solution, but I'm not sure we're there yet. And I'd be inclined to maybe we could see where we are in another month. And hopefully by then we've got at least a timeline on the elevator. Anyway, those are my suggestions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Henderson, go ahead.
Well, I know 82 Erie, they renovated, and which looks great and it works out good for staff and everybody coming there. But then they lost meeting rooms. I think there's one still on the 2nd floor, but I also know that staff uses that. So that one is kind of out of the question now. I'm looking forward to seeing if there is an alternative that we can come up with, because, we have had incidents in the past where the elevator stopped working and we had to cancel a meeting, which isn't really fair to us, staff, or the people, right? The residents. And I know some of the residents feel there's easy solutions to this, but as you were pointing out, Katia, that even tonight, just having 3 in the room and you've got your earphones and everything in, and you're still having feedback and having problems that, and I don't know, I feel these are working okay for now. Like, it's very frustrating that we can't meet in person, especially we got new counselors and interacting together and being able to interact with staff. But I mean, I think we should wait until the report comes back from the city clerk on what we can come up with a permanent second solution idea. That makes more sense. That's just my 2 cents.
So and I'm going to go to Councillor Seven next, but certainly what we're looking for at some point here is some direction of, to staff with regards to next step, whether it's a month or what have you. So Councillor Seven, go ahead.
Thank you. I don't need to ask the question anymore. It's been answered. Thank you.
Thank you. So Councillor Niger, I see your hand, Councillor Hunter, and then Councillor Burbach. Go ahead.
Thank you through the mayor. Have we investigated some other facilities that may already have these technologies in place, like the university, that where we can maybe connect and join at those areas?
And I'll turn it back to our clerk. Go ahead.
Through your worship, at this time, we've been focusing on city facilities just because it is easier to book and secure those locations. With using a space like the university, you are subject to their class schedules and whatnot. So our preference has been to just maintain at city facilities. And then again, we can have proper staffing as well at those locations.
Thank you.
Councillor Hunter and then Councillor Burbach. Go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. Through you, a question for our Chief Administrative Officer. If we're looking at pushing this down the road, is a month a reasonable period of time, or are we going to just be having to continually add months on? And I'd be interested to see if there's any feedback in that way.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to the CAO.
Thank you. Through you, your worship. I would say that based on the information that we have at hand, it will be difficult to guarantee, but I think that if you wanted to defer this for a month, I would be hopeful that we could come back with clearer timelines at that time.
Thank you. Councillor Burbach, I saw your hand. Go ahead. Thank you.
Thanks. Through the mayor, I was going to make a motion that we would continue with council committee and subcommittee meetings online until such time as the elevator is fixed and we can resume in the council chambers. And that advisory committees would return to in-person in March, just because then they're in different facilities. So that doesn't have to be in the motion, but my reasoning behind having the advisory committee start in March is that will give us some time to secure locations, and they are smaller groups that don't typically meet in council chambers. So yeah, that's the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Burbach. A seconder for that motion. Thank you, Councillor Briscoe. Discussion. I don't see anything. I'm just looking to the clerk if she's has the motion down.
Your worship, yes, I do.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? And there's none opposed, and that's unanimous, and that's carried. Thank you very much.
Through you, worship, item 7.7 is a resolution regarding the animal control bylaw review, and there is a staff recommendation that direction be given on one of the following options. Option 1, that a consultant be retained to complete a review of the animal control bylaw 195-2002, and $20,000 be added to the draft 2023 budget for this project. And then there's option 2, that the review of the animal control bylaw be referred to the 2024 budget deliberations.
Thank you. Councillor Seven, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Thank you. Through the mayor, could I just ask a question? If there was a recommendation that was not adopted, when would be an appropriate time to discuss that? Would that be when this comes back to council, whether regardless of the option? I'm just looking for some direction there.
Madam Clerk.
If I could clarify, when you say a recommendation not adopted, do you mean not adopted by council, but was made by the animal control bylaw working group?
That's right.
Through your worship, we could, if direction is given to proceed with the project, we could certainly add a second motion, which would provide additional direction for staff or the consultant to complete a further review and then bring forth the bylaw and any additional recommendations as part of that.
Thank you.
So we have two options, or council is certainly able to make their own option. Councillor Burback, go ahead.
Through the mayor, just another question about option 2 with the review of the animal control bylaw being referred to the budget. Just to refresh my memory, is that would that be completed by staff, or would we need to hire a consultant at that time as well?
Madam Clerk.
Through you, your worship, it's my understanding that closer to staff would review, and if staff were able to complete it as part of the 2024 work plan, it may not have any budget considerations. However, due to additional priorities or projects, there may be a request from additional funds.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McCabe.
Is the recommendation a requirement that we have a consultant come in, or I'm just not sure if I understand the process. Do we have to have a consultant in order to come up with a new bylaw? Is that? Yeah.
Madame Defoe.
Through your worship, to clarify, if council deems it a priority to complete the animal control bylaw review in 2023, then retaining a consultant to complete that review is required. If council would like to defer this to 2024 budget, then staff would come back with additional information on whether we would still recommend obtaining a consultant or whether staff could include that in our 2024 budgets and complete it internally.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councillor Briscoe, go ahead.
Thank you, through your worship. If for option 1, the 20,000, would that be coming from a reserve, or where would that 20 materialize from?
I'm going to turn over to our Director of Corporate Service. Go ahead.
Thank you, your worship. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
I've been having some microphone problems, my apologies. So if we defer it or refer it to the 2023 budget process, then I will consider whether there are options for funding that through alternative sources, but failing that, it would be a tax levy impact. So we hadn't really provided that full analysis at this stage.
Thank you. Councillor Burback.
I'd like to make a motion that we go with option 2.
A seconder for that. Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Discussion. Councillor Henderson and then Councillor Seven. Go ahead.
Well, I'd just like to point out to anybody watching that if you read the report, you will see that pretty well everything has already been adopted that was recommended by that working group who worked very hard on this and came forward. It doesn't mention that the things that we turned down, because I remember that we passed not to have chickens in the city because of other cities were finding it a problem and they were discontinuing it. So, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Seven.
Thank you. Through the mayor, I'm just wondering, should this motion be successful? My question is for Mr. Poe. Would it make sense to potentially, I guess at my discretion, to bring up something that could be added that was not adopted by previous council at some point in the future before then?
To the clerk.
Through your worship, yes, certainly direction could be given to staff to incorporate additional items for review as part of this, and then that would come forward with this item when it comes to budget in 2024 if this motion is passed.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further? So there is a motion that's been moved and seconded to select option 2. If there's nothing further, all in favor? Opposed, if any? And that's unanimous. Thank you.
Item 8 is business for which previous notice has been given, and item 8.1 is a notice of motion from Councillor Seven. At the January 9th, 2023 regular council meeting, notice was given that Councillor Seven intended to put forward the motion as noted on your agenda.
Councillor Seven, will you move such? Thank you, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Burback. Discussion. Councillor Seven, go right ahead.
Thank you. I just to explain, I put this forward. These were items that I've heard a lot about over the last term, and certainly during the election period. I feel they're potentially they could potentially improve the process and engagement of people with our process. And at this stage with this motion, I'm simply looking for staff to provide options as part of the already slated review of our procedural bylaws. So just
Thank you, Councillor Seven. Anything further? Councillor Beatty, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and more of a comment than a question. I appreciate Councillor Seven's motion here. However, I truly believe that we're looking for a solution for which there is truly not a problem, and I think we're asking staff to create yet more work when we're already moving well as a council. So although I'll leave this with that simple comment, I believe it's not necessary.
Anything further? Councillor Henderson and Councillor Briscoe.
I'm not sure if staff know this, but like we give people till what is it, 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning for the next council meeting and then staff works on Wednesday and Thursday getting it all developed, and then out to us sometimes late Thursday, sometimes early Thursday, or Friday at the very latest. How do they foresee how they could even do it a week ahead? Would you have to go back and change it once people make their, requests for, like, I guess we'd end up with a lot of addendums added? Or is that what happened? Or I'm not sure if you're aware of what other
we'll turn that to the clerk.
Cities are doing our side.
Through you, Your Worship, thank you. That's a great question. So currently, right now, delegation requests, if they're to be listed on the agenda, are due by 4:30 p.m. the Tuesday before the meeting. After that deadline, if a member of the public submits a delegation request, then our procedural bylaw provides that as long as the mayor and a chair agree, we can list them on an addendum. So there is a misconception that if a member of the public doesn't submit their delegation request by Tuesday at 4:30, that they can't be added, but they can. With respect to amendments, there are various models. So if the intent is to publish an agenda a week in advance, we could certainly create a delegation deadline. And I'll just use for a simple example, if the agenda were to go out the Monday, the week before, we could implement a delegation deadline of the Friday before, and then have that be a firm deadline, and then prepare what we would refer to as a consolidated agenda, which would include the information related to the delegates. So there are various options available, and we can certainly outline them in the future report that will be coming forward.
Thank you. And I think I saw Councillor Briscoe's hand and then Councillor Hunter. Go ahead, Councillor Briscoe.
Thank you, through your worship. We're aware that staff are undertaking a complete review of the procedural bylaw right now, and that there had been preference of identifying key things that need to change immediately, and then a more comprehensive review just to ensure we're not kind of patchworking the procedure. Are the proposed the items that you're looking into right now, are those previously been identified as the priorities to address right away? And then a follow-up question is, for that procedural review, is there a committee structure, or kind of just the review structure? Will staff be included, councillors, public, where we're going in that process generally?
Thank you. To the clerk.
Through you, Your Worship. So the intent from staff's perspective was to prepare an initial report for a future subcommittee meeting, and start to get some direction from council on those overarching goals. From there, we would then start to look and complete research on various options that are available. I would like to use Engage Stratford, potentially a public meeting, to get feedback from the public on various items, especially on delegation request, on when agendas should be published. So we're going to kind of review everything, identify what needs to be amended immediately. For example, there may be some sections where we're going to recommend that the procedures be improved so it's a bit easier. For example, employing more majority votes. There are other changes which just make it more consistent with legislative amendments. So we may bring those forward immediately. And then, as you noted, kind of begin the discussion on delegation timelines, deadlines, looking at our governance structure and really understanding what models are available, understanding what our goals are, and then how we can achieve them. And I apologize, I believe I missed your first question. I don't think I've, would you mind restating that?
Sure. Thank you very much. That's extremely helpful for us and I think for the public to know kind of just where we are in this procedural process. I think the first one was just that if those were priorities, kind of the recording of votes, the process, if those were the similar to the legislative ones that we know we have to address as priorities, if these were additional priorities, that this research would kind of fast track those and not kind of burden the staff.
Yes, through your worship, thank you so much. Yes, these were items that we had identified for inclusion as part of this review.
Thank you, Councillor Briscoe. Councillor Hunter.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question's been answered.
Thank you. Anything further? So item 8.1 has been moved and seconded. If there's nothing further, I will call the question. All in favor? Please keep your hand there. Opposed, if any? And that is carried. Thank you.
Item 9 is reports of the standing committees, and there are no standing committee reports to be considered at the January 23rd council meeting. Item 10 is notice of intent, and there's none scheduled. Moving to item 11, reading of the bylaws. There are 3 bylaws listed for consideration as follows. Item 11.1 is acceptance of proposal for a sound system for the William Allman Memorial Arena. Item 11.2 is to amend the zoning bylaw to remove the holding provision H22 from 4117 Perth line 36. And item 11.3 is to amend the fees and charges bylaw to amend the Ministry of Transportation fire response rates. These bylaws can be taken collectively upon unanimous vote of council present.
So a motion to take 11.1 to 11.3 collectively, moved by Councillor Henderson, seconded by Councillor McCabe. All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's unanimous. Then we're looking for a first and second reading of that item. Councillor Burbach and Councillor Briscoe, thank you. All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's unanimous. And third and final, Councillor Beattie and Councillor Wardolfa, thank you. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you.
Item 12 is the consent agenda. Are there any items listed on the consent agenda to be considered by council?
Seeing none.
Item 13 is new business. Are there any new business items?
Seeing none. And I was just going to suggest, Madam Clerk, before we move to the standing committees, if perhaps we can entertain a 7-minute break, if that's acceptable to you.
Through your worship, yes, certainly.
So we'll return at, let's go 9:20. We'll return 9:21. Thank you. We're just waiting on quorum. So welcome back. We're waiting on, I believe, Councillor Bean, but I'll turn it back to the clerk.
Through you, Worship. Item 14 is adjournment to a standing committee, and there is a motion that the council meeting adjourn to convene into standing committees as follows: Infrastructure, Transportation, and Safety Committee, then the Social Services Committee, then the then the Community Services Committee, and then to reconvene into council.
Thank you. That's moved by Councillor Burbach, second by Councillor McCabe. Thank you. All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. And we'll turn the floor over to Councillor Burbach. Go ahead, Chair.
Thank you. I'd like to call the Infrastructure, Transportation and Safety meeting committee to order. Second is disclosures of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof. Seeing none, item 3 is delegations, which we don't have any. Item 4 is the report of the chief building official, and their 4.1 is a proposed amendment to building bylaw 112-2005, including fee schedule A. So maybe I'll turn it over to the chief building official to present his report. So go ahead.
Great, thank you. And through the chair, tonight our objective is to approve the amendments to the building bylaw 112-2005 and building permit fee increase for all types of permits with an effective date for the new fees of February 1st, 2023. Just a little background: on December the 7th, 2022, a public meeting was held in accordance with the requirements of the Ontario Building Code Act. And at that time, there were no members of the public that spoke, and staff have also advised the Stratford and Area Builders Association of the proposed fee increase. The last building fee increase was in 2021, where we saw a 4% increase. And again, we are looking at across the board 4% increase on the bylaws. So the staff recommendation that you have is that schedules A, B, C, and D of the building bylaw 112-2005 as amended be further amended as outlined in this attachment and report, and that the proposed amendments to the building permit fees come into effect on February 1, 2023. And I am happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Go ahead, Councillor Henderson.
Do any of these fees have anything to do with Bill 23?
No, they do not.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions? Otherwise, I'd be looking for someone to move the staff recommendation. Councillor Henderson moves that, and Councillor Niger seconds. Are there any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. Thank you. Item 5 is adjournment. So I'd take a motion to adjourn. Councillor Hunter and seconded by Councillor Sebin. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burbach. I'll turn the Social Services Committee over to Chair Henderson. Go ahead, Councillor Henderson.
I'd like to call the Social Services Committee to order. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof? Seeing none, the subcommittee minutes are there for you to read. That was held January the 10th. Number 4 is delegations. There's none scheduled. Number 5 is report of the Supervisor of Social Services, Housing and Manager of Housing. The Housing Division update year in review. And would you like to comment on any of this? Kim? Ms. McRoy?
Thank you through the chair. The reports given for the subcommittee is were all for information purposes to give an update of where social services were at for the new council. So it gives a baseline of our current stats in each department and basically allows us to see where we're going in what direction, especially with the Ontario Works Division as our caseloads are increasing. And as well as our Anne Hathaway daycare, as well the capacity issues that we're having, that we have reached upwards of 90% of capacity, but still looking for ECEs. So those are the baselines of the reports that were written for this social services subcommittee.
Thank you. So the motion is that the report titled Housing Division Update Year in Review 2022 be received for information. Moved by Mayor Ritzma, seconded by Councillor Niger. Any comments or questions? All in favor? And that's unanimous, so it's carried. 6.1 is report of the manager of Anne Hathaway Daycare. So again, that was more information updating us. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Ms. McRoy?
Thank you through the chair. That's okay.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions on the report? Okay, so that the motion is that the report entitled Information on Anne Hathaway Daycare Center's Enrollment Status be received for information. Councillor Seven and Councillor Hunter, all in favor? And that's unanimous, so it's carried. Thank you. Moving on to 7.1, the report of the manager of Ontario Works. And again, I'll ask Ms. McRoy if you have anything you wanted to add to this.
Through the chair, again, just an update of where we are in regards to our caseloads at this point. So information only.
Thank you. So that the report titled 2022 Ontario Works and Review be received for information. Councillor Burbach and Councillor Beam, any questions or comments? All in favor? It's unanimous, so it's carried. Thank you. 8.1 is the report of the manager of Children's Services. And again, there was an overview, but looking at 2023. Did you want to add anything, Ms. McRoy, on this report?
That's fine.
No. Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. So the motion is that the report titled Children's Services Division Overview 2023 Outlook be received for information. And Councillor McGabe and Councillor Hunter, no questions or comments? All in favor? That's carried unanimously, so it's carried. And the last one is 9.1, the Homelessness Division Update.
Chair Henderson, we have just, I think you've missed an item, but I'll turn it back to the clerk.
Wait a minute. Oh, yes, the Children's Services.
Through the chair, item 7.2, Service
Oh.
System Manager bi-monthly update to council.
I apologize. So 7.2 is the Service Systems Manager bi-monthly update to council. And I think everything is in the report that needs to be done. Councillor Ritzman, Mayor Ritzman, do you have a?
I will move that item.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Burbach. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Carried. It's unanimously, so it's carried. Sorry about that. So now we're on to 9.1. That's correct? Yeah, okay. When I'm switching back between screens, anyway. The Homelessness Division update. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Ms. McRoy?
Thank you through the chair. Again, an information report reporting on our local numbers of the binding list, and so giving an up-to-date basis of where we're at for this year.
So the motion is that the report titled Homelessness Division Update is be received for information. Mover, Councillor Burbach and Councillor Hunter. All in favor? Carried. It's unanimous. And I'd just like to thank staff for a thorough report. For anybody that hasn't had the time, or anybody out in TV land, if you want to read it, it gives you a good background of all the departments and what they've done in 2022 and what they're looking forward to doing in 23. So the next part on here is adjournment. Councillor Burback and Councillor McCabe, all in favor? And that's unanimous, so it's carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair Henderson. I'll turn it over to Councillor Beatty. Chair Beatty, floor is yours.
Good evening. I'll call the meeting to order. Item number 2 is disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof. And I'm seeing none. Item 3 is the subcommittee meeting minutes, which you have before you. And item 4 is delegations, for which we have none scheduled. Item 5 is for the information of the committee. And as you can see from the minutes that were provided, at that meeting, we had a great opportunity for the director to introduce his team and also to provide his first monthly update. Director, he's joining us here this evening. Mr. Wolf, if you would like to say hello, and if there's any highlights you'd like to bring up from your monthly update.
To the chair, thank you, Councillor Beatty. Yes, it was last 2 weeks, obviously a lot going on. I'm catching up probably as fast as I ever could imagine, but we're doing well and enjoying every minute of it. Currently just learning what's going on all the different divisions of the department. I think, in the next subcommittee, we'll have a lot more reports and more to add. Staff's working hard on planning and getting ready for current times and even into the spring for our big flush of students and other of the part-time staff. So no, I'm excited to be on board, and we'll bring a lot more in our next few meetings. We have a lot of agreements and other items coming forward. So there's a lot of exciting things to do and lots of work to accomplish.
Great. Thank you, Director. Any questions for the Director? Seeing none. At this time, I accept a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mayor Ritzma, second by Councillor Najjar. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Beatty. And we're moving back to council reconvene. Madam Clerk.
Through your worship, item 15.1 is declarations of pecuniary interest. Are there any declarations made at standing committee to be restated at the reconvene portion?
Seeing none.
Item 15.2 is committee reports. Item 15.2.1 is the Infrastructure, Transportation and Safety Committee, and there is a motion that item 4.1 of the Infrastructure, Transportation and Safety Committee meeting dated January 23rd, 2023 be adopted as follows, and that being item 4.1, proposed amendment to building bylaw, including fee schedule A.
Mover, thank you, Chair Burback. Will move and second by Councillor McCabe. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed of any, and that's unanimous. Thank you.
Item 15.3 is reading of the bylaws, and there are 2 bylaws listed for consideration. Bylaw 11.4 is to revise the building permit fees, and bylaw 11.5 is the confirmatory bylaw. These bylaws can be taken collectively upon unanimous vote of council present.
Thank you. A mover for that. Thank you, Councillor Burback. Seconder, Councillor Bean. All in favor? Opposed of any, and that's unanimous. First and second mover. Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Second by Councillor Briscoe. All in favor? And that's unanimous. And third and final. Thank you, Councillor McCabe. Second by Councillor Bean. All in favor? And opposed of any, and that's unanimous. And our last item of this evening's session. And I thank you for all your work and to staff and council this evening. A motion to adjourn. Thank you, Councillor Niger, and second by Councillor Wardolfa. All in favor? And that's unanimous, and we're adjourned. Good night, everyone. Thank you very much.